How's it going, everyone? And welcome to another somber episode of Yanas Online, the show that talks about my journey through geek culture. And today is a bit somber because it kind of it stems from something that's quite important to me, and that is how geek culture like permeates into the rest of not only my life but other people's lives as well. And it's a video that I've been wanting to make for a few weeks now, but I think it's even more important now because of the death by suicide of one of my icons, one of the most influential people on my life, Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. And Linkin Park has been a band that I've listened to almost every other day for the past, I would say, half my life, ever since I discovered them. And the interesting story of how I discovered them was actually through geek culture. So I wanted to make this video for a few weeks about how sort of geek culture has influenced my music tastes over the years and vice versa. So this was only possible after I had discovered the internet, because pre-internet my sort of music, I would think, sort of exposure just came from either radio or TV, mostly from radio. But a few years ago, I would say early early high school, I had went to a sort of fair, like a circus thing that comes around every year. And in that fair, I found this random sketchy Indian dude who was selling out these 50 in one or 100 in one video game things. And it was a CD that you could put in your computer. Little did I know that I would only realize later on, because I was a dumb kid back in the day, that these were pirated sort of emulations of video games from the SNES era. And essentially that was what I had played on those were all of the Final Fantasies up until Final Fantasy VI. And that would then go on to spur my love for JRPGs and Final Fantasy specifically. So after I then discovered the internet, I really wanted to, find other ways of playing Final Fantasy. I didn't have access to PS1 or a computer that could emulate PS1 games. So what me and my brother used to do was just download, videos of Final Fantasy 9 or Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy 8 and just like watch how they would play, because we didn't have access to a machine that could run those games, but we loved Final Fantasy so much. And what we had found was what we would now know as AMVs, or anime music videos, particularly of either Dragon Ball Z or Final Fantasy 9, I think, and they were all played with the background music of Linkin Park. So one of my most vivid memories from sort of early high school actually, was this AMV of Final Fantasy 9 played over Linkin Park's In the End. And Linkin Park's In the End would then become my most favorite song of all time. It's one of the songs that for some reason I identify with the most, and it's kind of somber because it's a song about like you know futility, which is interesting. And it's kind of I don't know. I don't know, different strokes for different folks, I suppose. But it's one of my favorite songs. And there was another song, Crawling in My Skin, that was played over a Dragon Ball Z video. And at that time, Dragon Ball Z was really big. And it was Crawling in My Skin. It was that whole scene where Trunks was learning how to become Super Saiyan, resonated with me. So then after that, we scoured the internet for as many Linkin Park songs as we could find, because now we had become fans of Linkin Park after being fans of Final Fantasy and Dragon Ball Z. So over the years, that's how I discovered the genre of rock music. Because before then, I was just a dumb kid that used to listen to music on the radio because I couldn't afford to buy new music. I don't know what genres were. I discovered genres at that point, which is pretty late in the game. Um, so I discovered rock, alternative rock and soft rock, and that would then go on for me to discover other bands like My Chemical Romance, which is also a band that is dealing with some hectic stuff. Um, and other sort of bands like Nickelback or Remy Zero or other like soft rock type bands. And when I got to university, I got more into anime, like I discussed in my previous videos. When I got to university, that was the first time I started watching anime in the native Japanese. Um, and so, animes come with opening and closing music. If you're an anime fan, you pretty know that every anime comes with, the same opening music for that season. And some of them are really catchy songs. So at that point, I then started to, on my own, listen to those songs without actually being, watching the anime. So I used to download like Japanese J-pop essentially, and I went through the whole J-pop phase. And then I started actually listening to the original soundtrack. So not even the openings and closings, but the songs that were playing like when certain type of emotional um, hits were made, especially in Naruto. The composer is Toshiro Masuda, and every time there's like a sad scene in Naruto, either there's a song called Loneliness or Grief and Loneliness, and those are some I think pan flute music. Some of them are koto music. Some of them are what is shamisen music. So one day, me and Dope were actually listening to some of the stuff on YouTube, and then we were thinking, what is those instruments, and what kind of music can you make with them? Um, so then we discovered actually what is a shamisen, which is basically like a three-string like guitar thing slash percussion, because you hit the strings. Um, and through that, we found this other band that played shamisen music kind of like in a modern way. That was the Yoshida Brothers, and I went through a Yoshida Brothers phase. In terms of anime openings, I went through Ikimono phase, and Ikimono, they sang Bluebird, which is one of the later Shippuden Naruto openings, which I really digged. And so that pushed me down the avenue of J-pop, and I started listening to, you know, other J-pop music that wasn't actually, anime openings. So that influenced some of my music tastes. And then I discovered this whole genre, called geek rock, or what I call geek rock, which is basically, music based off geek culture. um, One of the premier sort of artists in that is Jonathan Coulton, who sang the ending song for Portal 2. Yes, which is a pretty funny song. I'll probably link to a YouTube video of it. But yeah, and then he also sang That Spells DNA, which is a song that explains what DNA is, which is pretty cool. And then I also sort of discovered parody music. So I fell down the rabbit hole of Weird Al Yankovic, which is an old school guy who parodies like famous songs and sings about other random, sometimes geeky things. Like, here's a song about Star Wars and like Spider-Man, um, and more recently, he just has a song about aluminum foil that's based on one of Lord's songs. And Yeah, so like it's gone back and forth. My music tastes have suddenly like shifted from where I don't necessarily like specific genres of music anymore, but it's more like influenced by the type of geek culture that I'm in. When I first played The Witcher 3, I had it came with the soundtrack for The Witcher, and I would just play that in my car for like 3 months. That was the only thing playing in my car, The Witcher 3 soundtrack, because the soundtrack in The Witcher 3 is amazing, like ridiculous. And then when after I played Skyrim, for some reason I only got to it last year. Um, I like listening to the song of the Dragonborn, which is, Dovahkiin. Um, and I played that over and over again. So I keep nowadays going back and forth between original soundtracks and openings and closings and different types of music that are inspired by geek culture or are used in geek culture. And yeah, it's been interesting, but it always stems back to all those type of music that I was playing, listening to while playing, Final Fantasy 6, and those were basically Linkin Park's entire discography. um, I've spent so many hours listening to all of that, and it's really sad what happened to Chester Bennington, and I hope he's in a much happier place at this point. So if you have a geek culture music taste story, let me know in the comments down below. I would be fascinated by all of your answers, and I would really like to know whether geek culture has inspired your music tastes in any way or vice versa. So let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, stay tuned and cheers.